The Hero with a Thousand Faces. This is the book written by Joseph Campbell that solidified his idea of a monomyth, a singular storytelling archetype that defines all timeless stories. We commonly refer to this as the hero's journey, and it is believed that if you ever want your story to work with audiences, it must adhere to the constraints of Joseph Campbell's monomyth. And this is a real problem. This kind of thinking has underscored the erroneous belief that all stories have already been told. It is also a justification for disliking bolder, inventive tales. And it is strangely enough this monomyth, this hero's journey that Toby Fox both adheres to and undermines in order to deliver the powerful journey of Kris and Susie in Deltarune. This is an analysis that I have been eager to tackle, and given the continuous wait for Deltarune chapters 3 through 5, I think it's high time that we dive into this hero's journey. Hi there everyone, Lars here from Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And when it comes to dealing with the hero's journey, I think it is very, very valuable to check out Overly Sarcastic Productions' video analysis about the monomyth. As their research and the work of many other historians and literary analysis have shown, there is no such thing as a monomyth. Many stories march to their own beat, and what we call the hero's journey is actually the collection of common tropes that define a heroic journey, but not necessarily the heroic journey. In fact, the pattern that Campbell set forth as the ultimate archetype is known as the medicine journey, which is specifically about a hero helping to save the world or the people they love by getting a cure or power that will allow them to win the day. As such, a hero's journey in any story can take all kinds of shapes, using all kinds of tropes, and wind its way to a vastly different set of conclusions than what Campbell set forth. When it comes to Deltarune, what I find fascinating is that the story Toby Fox wrote adheres to the medicine journey or Campbell's hero's journey to a T, and then in classic Toby fashion, he flips everything on its head and the story becomes absolutely wild. For the purposes of showing what I mean, let's have a look at the hero's journey that most people love or despise. I won't go into full detail here about every little step along the way, but here are the big steps within the pattern. First, we have the call to adventure, the call to the would-be hero to save their world and their loved ones. Then, refusing the call. The would-be hero rejects the call out of fear or weakness or something else. Then, we have meeting the mentor. The would-be hero meets someone who allows them to train and overcome their weaknesses or overcome their excuses for not adventuring and who will guide them on this journey. We then have crossing the threshold. The adventure begins and the would-be hero can start being considered a real hero. We then have tests, allies, and enemies. The new hero learns from the mentor, tests their strengths and weaknesses, fights off some baddies, is introduced to the big bad, and makes friends and possibly finds a love interest. We then have the step ordeal of the abyss. This is where the hero hits their greatest defeat. Could they lose altogether? And usually the mentor dies around this point. We then have the apotheosis. The hero confronts their defeat, rises to be the symbol, the pillar, the hero that they must become, and confronts the big bad. We then have the road back home. After winning, the hero must return home and to a new normal with the powers or the cure that they have obtained along their journey. And then the final step, master of two worlds. The hero advances in life as a person who understands their home and the world beyond, having knowledge and power and deeds that set them apart as a timeless legend. Now, the argument that too many people make is that if you follow this pattern, if you follow the formula of the hero's journey, you will have told an exceptional, timeless hero's tale. Now, let's see how Toby Fox did. How did he use the pattern of the hero's journey? I broke down the first chapter of Deltarune by each main character and checked to see if their actions and their character arcs fit into Campbell's formula. And I was a little surprised by what I discovered. Let's start off with Kris. Kris's call to adventure comes in 3 parts. First, they are asked by Alphys to go with Susie to the materials closet. Then they have their recognition of the Dark World when they arrive at the closet, and then meeting Ralsei and hearing the prophecy. 3 parts to being called to adventure. Then we have the refusal of the call. The player can choose to reject Ralsei's request to befriend all upcoming enemies back in Chapter 1, but Kris themselves, however, Kris openly rejects the journey if you pursue Spamton's questline in Chapter 2. Then, meeting the mentor. Kris meets their mentor when they meet Ralsei in the empty town. Crossing the threshold. Literally, Kris crosses this massive door, this massive threshold that will be forever sealed once the journey begins. In a neat way, this is symbolic of the quest starting and that there's no turning back from that point on. We then have tests, allies, and enemies. And quite literally, this is what we get. Kris must start solving puzzles and befriending various enemies or fighting them along the way. We get to meet the various citizens of the Dark World. They have to try to make friends with Susie and Lancer. And for all you shippers out there, there's already breadcrumbs sprinkled about for you to consider for potential future romances. We then have the Ordeal of the Abyss. This is where Lancer betrays the group in an attempt to save them from King. This leads to a full reconciliation with Susie and the beginning of Kris's friendship with her. And for the Apotheosis, Kris leads the group against King, and their friendship with Susie is confirmed by her saving them from King's clutches. We then have the Road Back Home. Kris says goodbye to all their new friends and seals the Dark Fountain. And as Master of 2 Worlds, Kris and Susie agree to go back to the Dark World tomorrow. Kris has a bunch of items that they came back with from the Dark World, and you can explore Hometown and get acquainted with Kris's life and contrast it to their adventures in the Dark World. We thus get to see that Kris has a very full life in Hometown, as well as now a very full life in the Dark World. Master of 2 Worlds. And then Kris reveals the ability to remove the player's soul. A sudden twist ending, if you will. What you will notice right off the bat is that some events in the monomyth are out of order here. Furthermore, Kris's journey is far from over. We're only 2 chapters in, we've got 5 more to go. However, what really surprised me is that Toby Fox, master of subversions and pulling great plot twists, had Kris's journey in Chapter 1 adhere very closely to the hero's journey. That was surprising. I actually didn't expect to see that because I'm just so used to Toby Fox going off and doing his own thing, be it marching to the beat of his own drum. Who cares what some old guy Joseph Campbell once said? But here we have it. Kris's journey, almost beat for beat, with a few things being out of order, follows the pattern of the monomyth. So what about Susie? Well, let's have a look at her journey. First, this begins with the call to adventure. Susie is largely in denial of any adventure until she meets Ralsei and receives the prophecy. She then promptly refuses the call. Susie straight up rejects this calling from the prophecy to be a hero, and she proceeds to smash her way through the people of the Dark World and all obstacles to get to the Dark Fountain and escape. And this kind of culminates then with her actually joining with Lancer and being one of the bad guys. And so, her refusal to the call begins really quickly and actually takes up most of Chapter 1. Meeting the mentor is kind of an interesting one right here because she's already met one of her mentors when she meets Ralsei and hears the prophecy. Though Kris actually serves as one of her biggest mentors after she decides to join the team for good and tries to be a hero. Crossing the threshold. Susie experiences this twice. First when she crosses the main door to get out of Ralsei's kingdom, and the second when she emerges from King's dungeons, committed to now becoming a real hero. And as far as tests, allies, and enemies go, Susie must solve a puzzle on her own within the dungeons, and then work with Kris and Ralsei to befriend others within the kingdom, and potentially hunt for the key fragments to release Jevil. Phasing off with Rules Alcard and the secret boss and everything like that, Susie goes through this step in the hero's journey very late within the story. We then have the Ordeal of the Abyss. For Susie, she experiences 2 of these moments. She already has one ordeal of the Abyss when Lancer betrays her, but she experiences a second when King goes to kill Kris. So Susie's apotheosis begins when she finally stands up to another bully, calling Kris her friend. This is the big emotional climactic moment for all of Chapter 1. And then the road back home, Susie says goodbye to all of her new friends and accompanies Kris to the Dark Fountain to close it. And as now master of 2 worlds, with friends in the light and dark world, Susie wants to go back and have fun with all her new friends and enjoy a life of being a hero. Again, you'll notice here that a lot of these events are now out of order. But when all put together, Susie fits the classic definition of a hero. She undergoes the whole transformation experience. I've claimed before that Susie is the real hero of Deltarune, and when you put her experiences into the monomyth pattern, it is clear that she undergoes the entire hero's journey. I think that this is partly why Susie is so beloved by the fanbase. She's like the Luke Skywalker, or Han Solo, or Bilbo Baggins, or Kratos of Toby Fox's game universe. It's really neat to see how she evolves as an individual, and it fits within the monomyth formula. Though once again, it's interesting how things are kind of out of order and how certain elements take up a huge chunk of the story, whereas you would think that given this monomyth and how it's usually executed, that wouldn't normally be the case. So Toby is sticking to the pattern in Chapter 1, but he's doing it in his own way. Finally, I thought it would be neat to turn the lens of the hero's journey onto Ralsei, since he is one of the 3 main heroes and we see a distinct character arc unfolding for him as well. So, what does his hero's journey look like? Well, we have the call to adventure. The eruption of a new fountain and meeting Kris and Susie is Ralsei's call to adventure. He may be their mentor, but he is also on his own adventure. And at least as far as we know, that's kind of how it goes based on in-game content, because there's still plenty of mysteries swirling around the good fluffy boy. Then refusing the call. Ralsei does not refuse the call. He's even willing to allow himself to be abused if he thinks it will help the heroes. So this entire step of the monomyth, that goes out the window. Meeting the mentor. Though Ralsei doesn't realize that at the beginning, Kris and Susie will be his mentors to help him grow up throughout the game. Then crossing the threshold. When Ralsei crosses the borders of his own land, he's crossed the literal threshold. Tests allies and enemies. Though he is there to mentor Kris and Susie, Ralsei does have his own experience with puzzles, confronting enemies, and working with Kris and Susie to make allies of everyone they meet. Then we have the ordeal of the Abyss. Ralsei's greatest ordeal is Lancer's betrayal and having an off-screen conversation with Kris. We don't fully understand what's going on here, but Ralsei is shouldering a very heavy burden, which culminates in Chapter 1 with him falling for King's ruse. Then, the apotheosis for Ralsei is when he walks away from the battle with King, having learned a valuable lesson about opening up and learning even more from Kris and Susie, realizing that there's a whole lot more to being a hero, and that you can't be naive and just think that everyone will be your friend. Sometimes you have to fight. For the road back home, Ralsei goes back to his own kingdom after Chapter 1 and gets ready to open up his kingdom to all the other Darkners that Kris and Susie have saved. And as master of 2 worlds, in Chapter 2, Ralsei demonstrates amazing awareness of the Lightner world, and even crosses between dark worlds without suffering the same consequences as Lancer and Rules. He also demonstrates a greater understanding of what will happen if the dark and light worlds merge. When we look at it, Ralsei has the messier of the 3 heroes' journeys. His quest and character arc are far more mysterious, and there's so much we just don't know. I mean, I've speculated plenty, but there's still so much that we can only guess at. However, it's pretty clear that Ralsei is growing as an individual, and is working hard to be the best hero possible. And this is where this all gets interesting. Chapter 1 of Deltarune follows the monomythic hero's journey extremely closely, creating a perfect redemption story for Susie that helps her to become a true friend and hero. Kris and Ralsei likewise have great heroic arcs to their characters. If the game ended with Chapter 1, it would be an oddly complete story despite all of the remaining mysteries. But then it goes out the window at the very end of Chapter 1 with Kris ripping out the player's soul. We are then thrown into Chapter 2, where Ralsei's actions and explanations have some people thinking that he might potentially be a villain. Susie actively wants to work against the good of both worlds by bringing Lancer and his friends to the light world, and thereby possibly bringing on the apocalypse. And Kris is working hard to undo the player's control and take on actions that we still have no clue what they're up to when opening an all-new dark fountain in the middle of the Dreamer household. And Berdly's heroic journey is about admitting that he's dumb and not as capable, only to wake up and think that's all just a dream. And depending on how you played Chapter 2, Noelle is either on an upwards trajectory to becoming a more confident individual, or is about to suffer a severe mental breakdown. So, does that mean that Deltarune rejects the classic hero's journey? Is this Toby being a subversive troll? Do our choices really not matter at all? No! Toby does enjoy being a troll, but he's got a very specific story that he wants to tell. He wants Deltarune to be an adventure where we become friends with everyone. It's a journey of 3 friends, 3 heroes, who face the greatest calamity and inspire hope. If that isn't a heroic story and message, then nothing is. But coming back to what Overly Sarcastic Productions said in their own video, there are multiple tropes for telling a heroic tale. And what makes a story unique is how you use all the available elements and characters in your own unique way. Originally, this video was supposed to be a theoretical analysis, trying to guess at where the characters might go next based on what we've learned in Chapters 1 and 2, and what their own heroic arcs indicate may happen. However, Toby likes pulling the rug out from under us, and so many theories that I've had might just blow up in my face. Even my treasured cruisy analyses and theories. Oh boy, yeah, that could all go out the window. But what I'm trying to say is that Toby is taking his time to craft an impressive story. He knows he's laboring under the towering shadow that is Undertale. He's expressly stated that he wanted to make a very different story with this game. So in order to do that, he has to make each day, each quest of 7, each dark world, a completely different experience that all connect together to tell a comprehensive overall tale, while at the same time giving each new set of heroes following along within that quest a chance to grow, to learn, and to become friends with everyone. And not to mention that you have to have the main trio, Kris, Susie, and Ralsei, going on their journeys throughout the whole thing. Whew, that's a lot to do. And when we think about it, simply repeating the medicine journey for Berdly and Noelle could have worked, but it would have relocated Kris, Susie, and Ralsei to side characters in their own adventure, which wouldn't have worked because they are the main characters. It would also require leaving out some of the darker, more tantalizing elements that really hit hard in Chapter 2, like learning about Des, or Berdly's confession about how he took advantage of Noelle's flustering mistake and is posing as a smart boy. On top of that, or underneath it as it might be, we have the far darker underlying story of the player controlling Kris, weird experiments happening within the town, Gaster, much to many fans' annoyances, yes he is indeed there, and a dark past that has engulfed the town, and Kris is trying to push back against it all. A story this complex cannot rely on Campbell's monomyth alone. Many incredible stories of heroes, from Harry Potter to the Wheel of Time, and yes, even the Lord of the Rings and Star Wars, have all used a complex mix of storytelling tropes to tell great epics of heroism. A good writer is not shackled to a particular pattern, but draws inspiration from multiple stories and then tells the story that does right by their characters and delivers a narratively powerful ending that brings the world building, the plot, and the characters together in a grand finale. It will be interesting to see where Toby goes next, Because at this point in the game, Ralsei is the only one acting like a traditional hero, trying to save everyone but carrying a mysterious burden where Kris is concerned. Susie has gone through the traditional hero's journey and is the main hero of the game, hands down. But her love for all of these new friends and riding high on success are kind of setting her up for another real moment of humbling in the future. And we can only guess what Kris is suffering through because it is we, the players, who are forcing them to go through the hero's journey or go murder hoboing across the dark world. With all of the mysteries that still need to be solved, and the friends to be made now with Caddy, Jockington, Temmie, Monster Kid, and Snowy, while also finding out what happened in the past and saving the Dreamers in the holidays, while fighting the Night and saving all the Dark Worlds, there's a lot of adventuring to do, and tons of character development to still undergo for our heroes. Wow! It's going to be amazing to see what happens next. But considering the powerful storytelling Toby has already set up and the brilliant use of the hero's journey so far, both in utilizing it and subverting it, I think we can be rest assured that Deltarune will continue to yield a wonderful epic of heroism and friendship. Now, if you've made it this far into the video, I sincerely thank you. And I want to know your insights, what they are regarding the use of the hero's journey in Deltarune chapters 1 and 2. I think this can be the beginning of a great discussion on character development arcs and the use of tropes and world building to weave a fantastic story. Hey, it's also the best we've got while we wait for chapter 3 to premiere. And if you'd like to support us here on Camille's Harem, please like and share this video. And we'd be over the moon if you could check out the stories that we have published. It would help us out tremendously. Links for them and more are in the description below. And thank you for joining us on this adventure that we call writing. And until the next video, y'all, tschüss.